President Trump stirring the pot among conservatives by posting a fiery rant against 4 prominent right-wing commentators on Thursday afternoon. Trump held nothing back, not that he ever really does, when he called out Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens and Alex Jones.
Those 4 had all voiced opposition to the war in Iran, which appears to be what set Trump off. His Long Truth Social post reads in part, quote, "They're stupid people. They know it. Their families know it. And everyone else knows it too. Look at their past. Look at their record. They don't have what it takes and they never did. They've all been thrown off television, lost their shows, and aren't even invited on TV because nobody cares about them. They're nut jobs, troublemakers, and will say anything necessary for some free and cheap publicity," end quote. Trump then went on to single each of them out. He brought up how Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News in 2023 and how Megyn Kelly accused him of making demeaning comments toward women when she was moderating a 2015 Republican debate.
He also called Candace Owens crazy for suggesting that the First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron, was born a man.
All right, friends, welcome back to Dr. John Podcast family. Trump just turned on his own media base, calling Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens nut jobs and Alex Jones a loser, attacking the very figures who built the ecosystem that made his political rise possible. The moment marks a documented turning point where the fundamental calculation of loyalty has shifted in ways that cannot be undone or explained away. Think about who these 3 figures actually are and what they represent to the MAGA movement. Tucker Carlson left Fox News, one of the most powerful media platforms in the world, to build one of the most watched independent media platforms on the planet, primarily on the strength of his MAGA audience. Millions of people who trust Trump also trust Tucker Carlson, and in many cases, they trust Tucker Carlson even more because he speaks to them in a way that feels authentic and unfiltered.
Can't really argue with him there. And he blasted Alex Jones for his conspiracy theories about the 2012 Sandy Hook school shooting being a hoax. Fair point. All 4 personalities, Trump says, are not MAGA anymore. He concluded the post with, quote, "MAGA is about making America great again, and these people have no idea how to do that, but I do, because the United States is now the hottest country anywhere in the world. President Donald J. Trump."
Carlson, Kelly, Owens, and Jones were all prominent supporters of Trump at one time or another, but more recently they've began to criticize aspects of his administration, especially the war in Iran. As of Friday morning, 2 of the 4 have offered public responses to the post. Alex Jones wrote on X, quote, "I have made it very clear that I am no longer support Trump, and I'm very thankful to him for making it clear that I have nothing to do with him. The new Trump is a rotting husk of the old Trump. I hope 47 enjoys Mark Levin being his spirit animal," end quote.
And Candace Owens wrote, quote, "It may be time to put Grandpa up in a home."
He asks the questions they want asked. He challenges the narratives they want challenged. He is one of them. Candace Owens has been one of the most prominent conservative voices of the last decade, speaking directly to the base that made Trump possible. She reaches audiences that traditional Republican communicators have struggled to reach, particularly Black and young audiences. She has been a visible symbol of the MAGA movement's claim to broad appeal. When the movement wanted to show that it wasn't just about old white guys, they pointed to Candace Owens. She was proof that the message resonated across demographic lines. And Alex Jones spent years promoting Trump when most of the mainstream media was against him. Whatever you think of Alex Jones, and I know many of you have strong opinions about him, the fact is that he was one of the earliest and most vocal Trump supporters in the alternative media space. He was there when it wasn't popular to be there. He took the hits that came with supporting Trump.
Well, this is all quite a fracas.
Well, my favorite part of this is that you agreed twice with President Trump.
I know. It's extraordinary. I don't think in all my time of doing Rising, I'm not sure I've ever agreed with him twice within 2 paragraphs.
Back to back, right?
Exactly,
there.
Yeah. But I mean, Candace and the Brigitte Macron stuff is crazy stuff. And I mean, much more, I find the Alex Jones, Sandy Hook stuff vastly more offensive. We'll get into the lighter parts of this in a second, but Alex Jones and Sandy Hook, I mean, parents who'd suffered unimaginable grief, and he's coming out with that nonsense. That's horrendous.
I totally agree.
Anyway.
But this is a bit of Trump reaps what he sows. He's always, he built his brand on being a big, brash, outspoken voice. And in that, he's helped bring up other big, brash, opinionated people. But it's clear Candace Owens jumped the shark a little while ago. She has kind of fully lost, I think, a touch with reality when she used to be a really great counter voice.
When the establishment was against him, his audience is deeply embedded in the MAGA movement. These are not random commentators. These are the people who built the ecosystem, the influencers who kept the fire burning between elections, the voices the MAGA base trusted when they weren't sure who else to trust. And Trump called them nut jobs and losers because they had the audacity to criticize his Iran war strategy. He attacked them publicly by name, with specific insults that were designed to diminish and humiliate them. And the result, the immediate, visible, documented result, is what observers are now calling a full-blown civil war within MAGA. Let me walk you through exactly what triggered this explosion, because understanding the sequence of events is crucial to understanding why this matters so much. When Trump's Iran war produced a canceled military strike, when the cost reached $29 billion, when 42 American aircraft were destroyed or damaged.
In the Republican Party and in the conservative movement to the leftists, that Charlie Kirk ilk of we go and we engage in the conversation. She was part of that in those early days. So to see that transformation, it's more than just Trump for her. Something else is going on. Alex Jones, if I was Trump, couldn't get him far enough away. Right. Can't disavow that guy enough, honestly. And Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, when you look at this, Tucker used to go and watch golf with the president, right? They would go to live tournaments together at Trump's golf courses. And Megyn Kelly, for their long tenured history together of not warmness, if you say nice things about Trump, he's going to bring you back into the fold. He's always willing to forgive and forget for the most part. But if you turn your back on him, he will absolutely come after you. And that's what he's doing with these people. But again, reap what you sow. You give him a big platform, you're going to have to deal with the repercussions of it. My strategy, if I was him, ignore them. Who cares what Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly, I know they have big platforms and big voices, but he has the biggest platform and the biggest voice.
When the ceasefire announcements came and went without resolution, some of the most prominent voices in MAGA media started asking hard questions. Tucker Carlson started questioning the strategic logic of the war. Candace Owens raised concerns about the cost and the lack of a clear end game. Alex Jones, whose entire brand has been built on anti-establishment, anti-war skepticism, was not going to stay quiet about a $29 billion conflict with no clear path to victory. And for a president who has spent his entire political career demanding absolute loyalty from his allies, who treats any criticism as personal betrayal, these voices asking hard questions were unacceptable.
Don't argue down. That's what I tell clients and candidates all the time. Don't punch down. If you're a senator, don't go after a House member. If you're the president, don't go after a senator. I feel like that still counts here.
So I think part of the issue that we actually agree on here is he's attacking these four people, but I think to both of us, it's a kind of camp of 2 and 2, right? Alex Jones and Candace Owens are definitely out on the wilder fringes.
Right.
And I think, I would tend to agree with you there that they can be sort of not fully ignored because they do have big audiences, but there's no need for him to engage with them. Now, with Tucker and Megyn, they've certainly become more critical of him. They've become more critical of him over the Iran war in particular. And there's a strand in that that's obviously to do with suspicion of Israel. But to me, and you're obviously much more familiar with the conservative or right-leaning media landscape, but my impression is they are more respected. Well, they're certainly not seen as Candace Owens, Alex Jones type figures, I don't think.
So he did what he always does with people who stop being unconditionally supportive. He attacked them. Nut jobs, losers. The people who helped build the MAGA movement called nut jobs by the man they helped put in power. Come on, can you believe this? This is genuinely wild. And the MAGA base, which is watching all of this unfold, which is watching the Iran war cost $29 billion, which reportedly has some members literally burning their MAGA hats because they are so unhappy with what they are seeing, is not receiving those attacks on Carlson and Jones and Owens the way Trump expected them to, because those are their voices. Those are the people they trust. And Trump just called them nut jobs. The psychological impact of that cannot be overstated.
The burning hats detail matters more than it might seem. Reports circulated that some MAGA supporters were literally burning their Make America Great Again hats because they were unhappy with Trump's actions, specifically his Iran war conduct. These are people who bought the hats, who wore them at rallies, who put them on in photographs, who made them a symbol of their political identity, and they are burning them. That is not a casual protest. That is a physical act of disconnection from a symbol that had personal meaning for them. It is people who were inside the movement deciding through an act they can see and feel and document that something has fundamentally changed. And then there are the numbers, because the polling data that dropped in the same window as the MAGA Civil War is the most damning political portrait of this presidency that has been captured in any single collection of polls. The New York Times and Siena College poll showed Trump at 37% approval, his lowest second-term rating. And here's what makes that number so devastating. It breaks a 17-year historical trend in which no president has stayed below 38% for more than a few days. Not Trump's first term, not Biden's worst stretch, not Obama's most difficult moments. 17 years without any president dipping below that threshold and staying below it for any meaningful period. And Trump is below it, held there, sustained. His 4-point drop in overall approval since January is described as historic in its pace and scope. And then drilling down into the specific issues, his immigration approval is at only 41%. Immigration. The one issue that has always been his strongest terrain, the signature promise of both of his presidential campaigns, the thing that fired up the base at every rally, the thing that his supporters considered non-negotiable and his opponents considered impossible to argue against effectively. And it is at 41%. That specific number tells you something devastating about the breadth of the approval collapse. It is not being held up by a strong performance on a signature issue. Even that is slipping. And then by May 20th, the 50+1 polling aggregator, which combines multiple polls, showed his disapproval at 59.8% versus 36.7% approval, a negative 23-point net rating. Almost 60% of America disapproving of this president. And Yago's independent analysis confirmed the pattern is not a momentary dip. It is a sustained slump holding near Joe Biden's worst numbers in polls. The parallel is instructive and uncomfortable in equal measure. Biden's approval problems were primarily driven by perceptions of his physical and cognitive capacity, the sense that the demands of the presidency had outpaced his ability to meet them. Trump's approval problems are being driven by a completely different set of factors. A $29 billion war that 64% of Americans oppose. A DOJ that multiple senators accused of acting as his personal law firm. An economic uncertainty index matching 2008 crisis levels. A canceled military strike under Iranian military pressure. NATO building security structures without American participation. Canada pivoting to China. And now a public civil war with his most trusted MAGA media allies. Different causes, completely different, but arriving at the same devastating polling outcome and sharing the same structural consequence. A presidency that is finding it increasingly difficult to govern effectively, maintain coalition loyalty, manage legislative relationships, and project strategic credibility from a position of such historically severe public disapproval. When you're at 37% approval, you can't pass legislation, you can't control the narrative, you can't keep your own party in line, you can't do the fundamental things that presidents need to do to be effective. And the compound effect of everything happening simultaneously is the most important thing to understand about this political moment. The MAGA Civil War did not happen in isolation. It happened at the same time as the 37% approval poll from the Times in Siena, at the same time as the 59.8% disapproval from 50+1, at the same time as the canceled Iran military strike under direct Iranian military pressure, at the same time as the DOJ lawyer exodus story documenting thousands of departures, at the same time as the Todd Blanche Senate meltdown where the acting attorney general called a senator a liar on national television, at the same time as the Anti-Weaponization Fund being sued in federal court, at the same time as the cognitive decline documentation, at the same time as NATO building post-American security frameworks, At the same time as Canada making a trade deal with China, at the same time as Putin warning about Iran escalation, at the same time as Gavin Newsom rallying Democratic resistance, at the same time as midterm projections showing a likely House flip. Each of those stories would be a defining political story if it happened alone. Together, hitting simultaneously across foreign policy, domestic governance, legal institutions, ally relations, internal political coalition, and personal presidential psychology, they create a compound political emergency that no communication strategy, no single news cycle, and no charismatic performance at a rally can adequately address. You cannot spin your way out of $29 billion in MAGA hat burnings and Senate hearing meltdowns and DOJ lawyer exodus numbers simultaneously. They are too many, too different, and all pointing in the same direction. Let me walk you through the specific sequence of events that triggered the MAGA Civil War in more detail, because it is important to understand that this was not a random explosion. It was a direct reaction to something the base genuinely feels. When Trump's Iran war produced a canceled military strike, when the cost reached $29 billion, when 42 American aircraft were destroyed or damaged, when the ceasefire announcements came and went without resolution, some of the most prominent voices in MAGA media started asking hard questions. Tucker Carlson started questioning the strategic logic of the war. He asked why America was spending billions of dollars on a conflict with no clear path to victory. He asked what the end game was. He asked who was benefiting from this war besides the defense contractors who were making money from it. These are the kinds of questions that the MAGA base has always appreciated. They like straight talk. They like people who challenge the establishment narrative, and Tucker Carlson was doing exactly that. Candace Owens raised concerns about the cost and the lack of a clear endgame. She pointed out that $29 billion is a lot of money that could be spent on domestic priorities. She asked why American lives and resources were being committed to a conflict that didn't seem to be serving American interests. She did what she has always done, which is speak directly to her audience in a way that feels authentic and unfiltered. Alex Jones, whose entire brand has been built on anti-establishment, anti-war skepticism, was not going to stay quiet about a $29 billion conflict with no clear path to victory. His audience expects him to question these kinds of things. They trust him precisely because he doesn't just repeat the official narrative. He challenges it. And when he challenged the Iran war narrative, he was doing what his audience wanted him to do. And for a president who has spent his entire political career demanding absolute loyalty from his allies, who treats any criticism as personal betrayal, these voices asking hard questions were unacceptable. So he did what he always does with people who stop being unconditionally supportive. He attacked them publicly by name. Nut jobs. The people who helped build the MAGA movement, called nut jobs by the man they helped put in power. Now let's talk about what the polling numbers actually mean and why they are so historically significant. The 17-year historical trend that Trump's 37% approval broke is not just a number. It is a documented floor, a level that presidents do not fall below and stay below because the political gravity at that level becomes brutal and usually forces some kind of corrective adjustment. 38% has been an effective lower bound for presidential approval for nearly 2 decades across very different presidents, very different political environments, and very different crises. Presidents at that level lose the ability to effectively use public pressure on Congress. They lose the loyalty of wavering members of their own party. They lose the narrative control that allows a president to frame events in their favor. And they lose the capacity to recover quickly because structural damage at that level compounds rather than dissipates. Trump has broken through that floor. He is below 38% and holding there. Trump's approval is in a sustained slump, 37% overall, with immigration at just 41%, down significantly from the start of his second term. The erosion is broad and across the board, reaching even his signature issue. While the Iran war costs, MAGA civil war, DOJ scandal, and 85-plus lawmakers demanding removal all compound each other, with no obvious compensating strong suit to lean on. And the Biden comparison, which Yogov made explicitly, is worth sitting with carefully because the parallel is more pointed than it might initially seem. Yogov said Trump's sustained approval slump is holding near Joe Biden's worst numbers in polls. Biden's worst numbers, not Biden's average, not Biden's general performance, his worst. The numbers that represented Biden at his most politically damaged. The period when his own party was having the conversation about whether he should step aside. When prominent Democrats were privately expressing doubts that eventually became public. When the phrase, "too old and too damaged to win," was circulating in rooms where senior Democrats were meeting. Biden's worst numbers represented a presidency that the Democratic Party concluded was too politically compromised to continue into another election cycle. And Trump is at that level, sustained, confirmed across multiple polling organizations. Not a brief dip that bounced back, a sustained slump holding at that floor. The parallel is instructive and uncomfortable in equal measure. Different causes, completely different, but arriving at the same devastating polling outcome and sharing the same structural consequence. Now let's talk about the MAGA civil war and what it means for Trump's political survival. Attacking Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones was one of the most politically self-destructive things Trump has done in this entire second term. And the consequences for his standing with the MAGA base are going to be lasting rather than temporary. Here's why this specific choice matters so much. The MAGA movement has always been based on a specific psychological contract between Trump and his supporters, one that differs fundamentally from the contractual basis of most political coalitions. The contract is not primarily about policy. It is not about tax rates or immigration enforcement numbers or specific legislative outcomes. The contract is about identity and opposition. It says, "I, in your champion, against a corrupt and contemptuous establishment that hates you and wants to erase everything you value. I fight for you when nobody else will. I tell the truth that the system punishes people for telling. And in return for that championing, you give me your loyalty." The power of that contract has been Trump's greatest political asset for a decade. It has survived controversies, legal challenges, financial scandals, and policy failures that would have ended other careers because the loyalty was personal and deep-rooted in identity and opposition rather than in approval of any specific decision. But here's what breaks a loyalty contract built on that foundation: when the leader attacks the people the followers most trust. When the champion calls the trusted voices of the movement nut jobs for having the same doubts the movement itself is starting to feel. When Trump calls Carlson, Owens, and Jones nut jobs, he's not attacking outsiders, he's attacking trusted voices inside the MAGA base, a fundamentally different kind of attack. The MAGA hat burnings and Civil War framing signal that the loyalty mechanism that has always protected Trump is cracking for the first time, as personal identity-based loyalty, the kind that made him historically resilient, starts to fracture. When Tucker Carlson, one of the most trusted voices in the MAGA information ecosystem, publicly criticizes the Iran war and gets called a nut job by Trump in return, it creates something that has rarely existed in the Trump political world: a permission structure for base members to express their own doubts without feeling like they are betraying the team. If Tucker Carlson can question this and still be respected by other members of the movement, then maybe I can question it too. That is the psychological permission structure the Civil War creates. The hat burnings are the visible physical expression of that permission being used. People who are inside the loyalty contract are exiting it physically, symbolically with fire. Not all of them, not even most of them yet, but any base members burning the hats they wore at rallies are performing an irreversible act. You cannot unburn a hat. And the loyalty mechanism that has protected Trump through everything is showing its first serious documented movement-level strain. These mechanisms, once they start genuinely fraying, do not typically repair themselves while the underlying conditions that cause the fraying are still present and still worsening. The compound effect of everything happening simultaneously is the most important thing to understand about this political moment, and the reason it represents a qualitatively different crisis than any single scandal would. The MAGA Civil War did not happen in isolation. It happened at the same time as the 37% approval poll from the Times and Siena. At the same time as the 59.8% disapproval from 50+1. At the same time as the canceled Iran military strike under direct Iranian military pressure. At the same time as the DOJ lawyer exodus story documenting 8,599 departures. At the same time as the Todd Blanche Senate meltdown, where the acting attorney general called a senator a liar on national television. At the same time as the anti-weaponization fund being sued in federal court by Capitol Police. At the same time as the cognitive decline documentation in the Yugoff majority saying his health affects his governance. At the same time as NATO building post-American security frameworks. At the same time as Canada making a trade deal with China and declaring it is master of its own house. At the same time as Putin warning about Iran escalation in a 90-minute call. At the same time as Gavin Newsom rallying Democratic resistance in Washington and the midterm projections showing a likely House flip, each of these stories would be a defining political story if it happened alone. Together, hitting simultaneously across foreign policy, domestic governance, legal institutions, ally relations, internal political coalition, and personal presidential psychology, they create a compound political emergency that no communication strategy, no single news cycle, and no charismatic performance at a rally can adequately address. You cannot spin your way out of $29 billion in MAGA hat burnings and Senate hearing meltdowns and DOJ lawyer exodus numbers simultaneously. They are too many, too different, and all pointing in the same direction. The 37% approval below the 17-year floor, sustained, confirmed with no strong topic holding it up, is the number that captures the full weight of all of it in a single data point. That is precisely where this presidency stands right now. A president at war with his own base, a movement that is fracturing in real time, a polling collapse that has broken historical records for all the wrong reasons, an economy that is sputtering under the weight of a $29 billion conflict, a legal system that is pushing back against executive overreach, allies who are building new security frameworks without American participation, and a base that is literally burning the symbols of their own political identity. The question now is what happens next. Can Trump repair the damage with his base? Can he find a way to bring Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones back into the fold? Or has he permanently alienated the very people who built the media ecosystem that sustained his movement? Can he turn his polling numbers around? Or has the 17-year floor that he broke become the new ceiling that he can't get back above? Can he manage the multiple simultaneous crises that are hitting his administration from every direction? Or is this the beginning of the end for his presidency? The loyalty contract that protected Trump has been breached. His attacks on Carlson, Owens, and Jones, combined with MAGA hat burnings, signal a base questioning its champion. With polling at historic lows and multiple crises compounding, Americans are watching a president at war with his own movement, a problem no amount of spin can fix.